اسمع خطأ.
نعم.
Listen, Attorney General Kuwait. He's the one running for Attorney General of the whole state.
الله تعطيني جنون على
Thank you for here. This was an amazing night, mashallah. We had
14,000 calls.
14,000 calls. So, alhamdulillah, we have our Sheikh, Omar, Suleiman, we have Brother Keith, we have Marcus, and all these people are amazing leaders. So I'm going to give Abdullah Farah to just lead us on discussion. So
how's everyone doing tonight?
Alhamdulillah.
Thank you for all the volunteers, for the guests, for our distinguished speakers, and our politicians here that are. We are glad to have you guys all here tonight. This time in Minnesota elections, it's there's so much at stake, especially in our country. The politics of fear and division, it's all around us. And at this time, to really be, to be active and to say no, that shows the courage and to be greater than fear. This is why we themed this night and the campaign that we had as Faith in Minnesota is that we are greater than fear. As a state, we are greater than fear. We are not going to stop for the division. We're not going to be afraid of our neighbors. We're not going to be afraid of the unknown or those who we don't know. We've been door knocking, me and the volunteers and the canvassers. We've knocked doors in places that neighborhoods I've never went to. We've made phone calls to complete strangers, talking to them. And actually, the interesting thing is everyone is feeling the same way. That the current climate is we're losing our moral values. We're losing the decency and the humanity because of some people, they just want to score some political points and so forth like that. So what we've been telling the community is to vote for your issues, vote for your values, vote for candidates that really care, that are going to be with you and so forth like that. And and also getting them engaged in phone banking, in text banking, and so forth like that. So it's a pleasure for me to be here tonight with all the volunteers that I know every single day show up. Every phone banking, every door knocking. We have just hit GOTV, which is get out to vote. And I'm hearing a lot from the community that people stop me everywhere I go, like, hey, I just voted, or or I'm going to vote tomorrow. Where can I vote? And so people who are pledging in Friday prayers and so forth like that. So there's so much excitement, and I believe that this election season or this midterm elections, we will show that we are greater than fear. Are we greater than fear, guys? Yeah. All right, thank you so much. So first, I'm going to have Brother Keith, inshallah, speak. Thank you, brother.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Let me just remind all of us what we already know. This great institution of ours was the target of a terrorist attack. And the purpose of an attack is to inject so much fear that you are immobilized, that you cower, that you don't come out, that you hide, that you back down. It is designed to intimidate. It's an intimidation tactic. And they hope that what you'll do is be so afraid that you'll just go away. But this master has decided to do quite the opposite. In fact, you made 14,000 calls tonight, which means that you're reaching out to, yes, the Muslim community, but also the Christian community, the Jewish community, the Baha'i community, the Hindu community. skin. Some might be black. Some might be brown. It might be male. It might be female. You don't know. But you're reaching out to them as a human being, as a creature of God who wants a better life for them and their families. Reaching out to them is a beautiful expression. I believe in the power of personal presence. Have you ever noticed that if you had a sick friend and if you just didn't visit them, that's a lot different from if you have a sick friend and you do visit them. Sometimes you're in the hospital room and you don't have to say a word. Your presence alone signals to them that you care. Well, it works that way in politics too. Your presence, calling, being there, listening, sharing, will get somebody to vote where if you just sent them a mailer or did a TV ad, never could. So understand that your personal involvement, your personal effort makes a big difference. And we're doing more than trying to win an election. We're trying to win a strong community. And the calling and the door knocking builds a strong community. You're gonna run into people later on after this election who you met during the election. The brother talked about door knocking. You're gonna walk into the gas station or store one day, and you're gonna see them, oh, I remember you. And you will have made a relationship. Since I've been a member of Congress, I have presided over 3 weddings of people who volunteered on the campaign. Now that's building community right there. That's building family right there. And what I'm telling you is you're doing much more than just helping them with an election. You're building a community through bonds of affection. Last thing I want to say, I'm running for Minnesota Attorney General. Some of you all are thinking, Brother Keith, why would you be in Congress for 12 years and leave Congress and go to be Attorney General? The reason is I think I could do more good for more people faster. As a member of Congress, you're supposed to write the law. But if there's no one there to enforce the law, then it's just words on a page. I want to be able to take them to court when they charge you too much for your insulin, too much for your Daraprim, too much for your heart medicine. You know, insulin has gone up 1,200% in the last 20 years. Totally unjustified by the expense. It's just taking money from people because they gotta have it, so they'll pay anything for it. But I've met people who have died because they watered down their insulin dosage. As your Attorney General, I'm gonna fight to make sure they get it. Or what about the people at Oakdale who, because of the production process of a big corporation, polluted their groundwater and created a cancer cluster in that neighborhood? Or what about the Islamophobia? As your Attorney General, we're gonna fight to prosecute people who commit hate crimes and make sure that everyone is safe in this community. So I just want to say, I'm deeply grateful to Imam Omar Suleiman for joining us. Please know this brother got on planes to be here with us. We arranged his schedule. To be here with us. Now I didn't tell you, there are many great teachers of Islam, many, some in this room. But Omar Suleiman is a special teacher of Islam. He's leading this country to understand Islam really is about peace, love, justice. And he does it through his speeches and his khutbahs. He also does it with his body. He got arrested, standing up for immigration justice.
Allah.
So please know that if you've ever looked and said, oh, you know, like Martin Luther King and Jewish community has these great people like Rabbi Heschel. They got these civil rights leaders in their community. Where's ours? Well, I can show you 3 right here in this room. Right here. Imam right there. Where's the man go? Right there. And more every day. And all y'all who've been calling every day are those Muslim civil rights, human rights advocates who are proving to the haters that they are wrong about us, that they're wrong about this country, that our neighbors don't hate us, and that we love all humanity. And we prove it every single day. And so I'm here to tell you, Imam Omar Suleiman is one of the best examples you can have of somebody who's living that every day. So, thank you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam.
We begin in the name of Allah, the most compassionate and most merciful. We seek His mercy and His guidance, and we ask Him to bless this gathering and accept the efforts of this gathering, and to guide us beyond this gathering to that which is most pleasing to Him, and that which is most beneficial to His creation. Let me just say that, first of all, I'm undeserving of that praise, because at the end of the day, the people that truly deserve the credit, I think that Brother Keith would agree more than anything else. The people that volunteered, the people that put this together. So thank you all for making it happen. And though at the end of the day, your name might not be the one that's called out and recognized in public, you might be the change maker. You might be the one who made the difference, not just in the selection, but beyond, and in so many other ways, through your activism, through your work. Today was an interesting day for me. We spent the day at the Jewish Community Center in Dallas before Jummah Khutbah, before we had Salat al-Jummah. We were with the Jewish community. We had in our community make personal cards, which we could deliver, the adults, the kids, to members of the Jewish community, just to show that level of solidarity, to say that we're with you. We understand what it's like to be intimidated. We understand what it's like to be attacked. We understand what it's like to always be treated like a foreign threat, even when you know no other country. We understand what it's like to be looked at differently just because you worship differently. We understand those sentiments, we understand those feelings. And we also understand what it's like to receive support in those vulnerable moments. To have someone reach out to you that you might not have met prior to that tragedy, to have someone say to you that my shoulder is your shoulder, that I will walk with you, that I will cry with you, that I will be there for you beyond the moment. And those were 3 words that kept on hitting me in the head as I was walking around today, and I was on my Spirit Airlines flight. That'll make you think. Do a lot of contemplating when you're on Spirit. Beyond the moment, beyond the moment, beyond the moment. The moment is a catalyst. There are things that catalyze our commitments to lofty ideals. Things that insert us into a process that we thought we were born excluded from. Things that ignite in us a passion for that which drove the Prophet, peace be upon him, beyond sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his commitment to Tawheed and his commitment to the continuity of the beautiful religion that he's passed down to us, connecting that to a more equitable society, to a more just society, to striving for the poor, striving for the dignity of people. And I was asked this question recently, what is your politics? And there was one ayah that came to mind, and I want you to remember this, inshallah. Next time you're asked, what's your politics? One verse in the Quran, وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. We have honored the child of Adam. That's your politics.
Some people say, well, that's humanist. What's the difference between a humanist and a theological humanitarian? We are driven by God, by Allah, to work for His creation. Because in our tradition, our understanding, we function in our personal worship by understanding that God has a right upon us. And we also function with society around us by understanding that God has assigned rights to people around us and to the environment around us and to the things that are around us. And those rights are sacred. They're sanctified because Allah made them sacred. Allah made them sanctified. And that responsibility to them is in fact an act of worship to Him. Because He put that there for you. And I was reflecting in the Jum'ah khutbah today. You know, if you look in the Quran, one of my teachers in tafsir, in the interpretation of the Quran, he actually pointed out, saying, every time Allah mentions the relationship of the Muslim community to the greater society, Allah mentions it either in the capacity of test or the capacity of responsibility. In the capacity of test or the capacity of responsibility. Kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrijat lin-nas. You were the best nation produced for the people. تَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَتَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنكَرِ وَتُؤْمِنُونَ بِاللَّهِ. You enjoy that which is good, you forbid that which is evil, and you believe in Allah. You were produced for the people. The people were not produced for you. You were produced for the people. When you think of the people around you, you don't think about what they owe you, you think about what you owe them. You worry about being questioned about them. You don't think about, how do I go into self-preservation? And I think we've seen the dangers of this attitude of self-preservation, whether it's on an individual level or whether it is on a community level. The Prophet, peace be upon him, said, how can Allah honor a people? How can Allah honor a people that do not take from, or that do not protect their weak ones, their vulnerable ones, from their powerful ones? How can Allah establish and hold up a people that do not protect their vulnerable ones from their powerful ones? This is the story of man from the very beginning. Some people get too much power and become intoxicated by that power and exploit and oppress and subjugate with that power. And often will employ a distorted version of theology to sanction that power and to sanction those abuses. If you think about the role that religion is playing in the world today, before we even talk about Islam, let's just talk about pulpits. I'm from New Orleans. I live in Texas. I see what evil religion looks like. I see what it looks like day in and day out when pulpits are used to punish and torture and oppress and sanction all of the abuses under the sun. I've got Robert Jeffress in Dallas, Trump's pastor. All right? And I had to deal with David Duke in New Orleans. I've seen what pulpits can do. When you see a bunch of pastors with their hands on Donald Trump, praying for him, and you see people doing like exorcism to protect him from the jinn, something to do with the demons, and you gotta protect him from the evil spirits and stuff like that. When you see pulpits that are used in this country, I mean, just think about this. Pulpits that are used, entire sermons dedicated to making sure that Confederate monuments are not taken down. That white supremacy remains enshrined and uplifted in the law of the land. That tells you what religion has become here. And let's not even get started with how religion is used in some Muslim countries. So this is not just about Christianity right now. This is just about how powerful and potent religion is if it's used as a tool to suppress. Now, in this country, and what we have here, when you think about the great civil rights leaders and you think about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and you think about Al-Hajj Malak al-Shabazz, Malcolm X, they were driven by faith. They weren't secular reformers. They were driven by faith. And the more that I've had the opportunity to read, I talked about Malcolm X here, gave a 4-hour seminar. How many of you were at that seminar, by the way? Okay, some of you. I talked about Malcolm after Mecca, that last year of Malcolm X, we talked about his diary, when you actually read through his diary. I saw the man's mushaf, his copy of the Quran, and what he wrote and what he read. I've talked to people about Malcolm's Qiyamul Layl, Malcolm standing up and praying at night. When you get 20 death threats a day, you have to draw from something to keep going. Malcolm had that foundation, he had that base, and no one questioned his dedication to people because Malcolm viewed the rights of the people around him, the society around him, particularly black people in America that have been subjugated in the worst ways by politics in America, by religion in America, that were lynched in the name of religion, burned on crosses in America, particularly them. His dedication to people could not have been possible without a solid connection to his Creator. He was driven by that. You know, there's a book called On the Side of My People. It's written by a white evangelical Christian, Louis DeCaro, about Malcolm X. And he said Malcolm, the best way to describe Malcolm is a religious revolutionist. I mean, he was a revolutionary, but driven by something greater. And so here we are in this masjid. And there are three approaches that we could take as people of religion. We could look at the ugliness on the outside, that which has been sanctioned by distorted religion, and that which is purely in the secular domain. And we can say that, yes, that's ugly, but we need to, we just need to duck and stay away. And we need to be in self-preservation mode as a community because, this whole thing is going to come to pass one day, and at the end of the day, the less that we engage with people around us, the more that we can stay authentic to ourselves, to our values, to our ideals. So let's just duck away from the public until this all blows over. There are two problems with that. Number one, we would not be living up to some of the primary descriptions that Allah gave to this community in the Quran. What do you do about being called to be there for people? Did Nas produced for people? How do you fulfill that if you're going to duck the trends? And by the way, we're all immigrants. And I'm not just talking about we're a nation of immigrants right now. We're all immigrants from Jannah, from paradise, temporarily in this world, and we will go back home, inshallah. So, what an immigrant, what can happen sometimes with someone that goes to a land that's not theirs and they're not welcomed and made part of that land, that they just try to duck, try to avoid the political winds, try to avoid the turmoil, try to avoid all of the, all the social movements around them, just try to maintain some level of identity, some level of connection to that which was dear to them and dear to their identity. And in the process, nobody wins. You don't live up to your religious identity, and at the same time, it is dangerous. It is dangerous. This masjid, had that terrorist attack succeeded, would be very different right now. The mindset of people would be very different. This was a tragedy, and it could have been a worse tragedy. That's not to say that white supremacy is not going to exist beyond this activity, beyond this election. That's not to say that, inshallah, if we are able to remove all of these bigots from all of these places of power, that exploitation and oppression is not, is going to somehow dissipate. That's not to say that, predatory economics are not going to thrive and continue to put people in unfavorable situations. That's not, all of that has to be fought. And all of that is going to take a very, very long time to fight. But what it is to say is that when we recognize that we cannot afford to be complacent, we can't afford to be passive, we will not be true to what Allah has called us to, nor will we be doing our communities any favors by trying to duck. Because what we have allowed the Muslim community to become in so many places in this country, we've allowed the Muslim community to be the whipping boy of politicians that are trying to score cheap political points by demonizing the community, scoring their points, putting the Muslim community in harm's way, and then once they win their election, once they move on, they don't care anymore about the Muslim community. They don't care about the harm that they have thrown towards the Muslim community's way because they got what they wanted. And then the next time the election comes on, they're going to target the Muslim community. They're going to target. Donald Trump posted one of the most racist ads. Probably, and it's hard to say the most racist ad he's probably posted. 2 days ago about Latinos. These people will these people have no load that they will sink to, that they will stoop to, in order to maintain power. Donald Trump and people that operate out of that same structure, out of that same fascism, will continue to sink lower and lower and lower until what? Until they cannot afford to target any of our communities anymore. Because we're too politically potent. We're too established. We're too proud. We are too connected. We are too effective. Our coalitions that extend beyond the Muslim community, coalitions that mirror what the Prophet, peace be upon him, established in Mecca, a league of justice, the coalition Hifz al-Fulul, a coalition based on virtue. Those coalitions are too strong to allow for any person, any community, Muslim or otherwise, to be targeted for cheap political points. And the political ramifications, the ramifications to their power, are too effective for them to do that again. You know what happens? And by the way, let me also say this, that I am not suggesting that Muslims should accept being tokenized as a community. Do not accept any politicians taking your vote for granted. I'm not talking about you. You don't count. You're excluded from this part of the discussion. And you're excluded from this discussion. Yeah, well, we gotta wait till Mark's in office. But in general, look, it's not enough for people to have us at Ramadan Iftaris. Let me just put it that way. And that's on us. We have to continue that engagement beyond the election. Like, you don't just get to come get our vote and disappear. And it's on us to make sure that we continue to be heard after the election. Building a movement means seizing the moment. And there was a quote there's a book, by the way, that if you read by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. called Why We Can't Wait. And Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. talked about this idea of the revolt versus the social movement. That if things are restricted, if we are restricted to the moment, if we're restricted to just that one protest, if we're restricted to that one rallying call, if we're restricted by time, by place, by incidents, then all it is a loud revolt. At some point, you're outraged at exploitation, at injustice, at oppression. And by the way, you know who hates oppression most? You know who hates injustice most? Who hates it most?
Allah.
Allah hates it most. Allah hates oppression. Allah hates it most. So much so, يَا عِبَادِي إِنِّي حَرَّمْتُ الظُّلْمَ عَلَى نَفْسِي. O my servants, I have made oppression forbidden for me. وَجَعَلْتُهُ بَيْنَكُمْ مُحَرَّمًا. And I've made it forbidden for you. If I've made it forbidden for me, if Allah made it forbidden for himself, how dare you oppress another person? How dare you think that you can be in a position to wrong someone else? So Allah hates oppression. We know that the first rule on the Day of Judgment, لَا ظُلْمَ الْيَوْمِ, there will be no injustice today. Allah has set that rule. So Allah hates it more than anybody else. It's like when the Prophet, peace be upon him, said that Allah has more ghira than anyone else, right? Sometimes we get moved and we think that that these righteous calls to goodness are just restricted to us. No, Allah hates dhulm, Allah hates oppression. And because Allah hates oppression, Allah has tasked us with ridding the world around us of oppression. Because there's a problem when a person thinks that they can take someone else's rights and not be held accountable. That's interfering in the relationship and the covenant and the boundaries which the divine has placed upon us. So when someone interferes with that balance, they are stepping into very dangerous territories. And Allah has commanded us not to be silent with them. One of the most powerful things about the Prophet, peace be upon him, is that the Prophet ﷺ interacted with so many different contexts, and he was consistent. The Prophet, peace be upon him, knew what it was like to live like a persecuted minority. The Prophet, peace be upon him, taught his companions how to live in Abyssinia. as a minority with a welcoming authority. The Prophet, peace be upon him, taught this community how to function as a majority with a hostile minority, as a majority with a friendly minority. The Prophet, peace be upon him, taught us how to uphold ethics and consistency. And no matter what position we are in, he taught us that. But you know what's so consistent about the Prophet, peace be upon him? That whether he was a fugitive in Mecca or a head of state in Medina, you know where you'd find him? Where would you find the Prophet, peace be upon him? He said, find me amongst the poor. Find me amongst the weak. Find me amongst the vulnerable. Do you think that you are supported or given help by God except by the way that you treat your vulnerable ones? Whether you're in a position of power or you're in a position of vulnerability, because there's no such thing as a position of weakness if you're fighting. You're in a position of vulnerability. Where does God see you? Where does Allah see you? Where are you in the trenches? Where are you striving for the exploited in society around you? We're living in a world of apathy, where when people see homeless people, when they see people on the street that can't eat or drink, they just step over them to get to their fine restaurant. When people have no issues, fronting the bill when they go to the hospital or a doctor, they don't have to think about it because they've been blessed by Allah with that wealth. Don't think about those people that literally die because they can't afford to be treated. That painful decision. SubhanAllah, I know healthcare doesn't get discussed much in our community, but you might have been there at some point. Like, I remember being there. Where my daughter had a 105 fever, and I didn't know if I should take her to the hospital because I couldn't afford at the time to take her to the hospital. And I have to make a decision now whether I just, see how this turns out, or go to the ER and try to take care of a bill that I can't afford because the situation is that dire. Like, you think about how unjust that is and how pathetic that is for the richest nation in the world that can spend billions and billions of dollars bombing people and selling arms to others that bomb people and manufacturing imperialism and still colonizing the world, that a nation that does that still cannot ensure that people don't have to die because they can't eat or they can't see a doctor or be treated, or that their basic fundamental rights are uplifted or upheld. That a Flint, Michigan can exist in America in the 21st century. What does that tell you about the priorities of our nation? Now, I want to leave you on this spot because I know I'm speaking for too long. Look, one of the things that's important for us to understand is that people in power are going to do what people in power do. People that have unchecked power are going to do what people who have unchecked power do. People who will stoop to any level in order to ensure that their interests are maintained, that will sacrifice in the cause and their thirst for power human beings that they have managed to dehumanize enough in the public domain that other human beings will simply close their eyes and turn away and say that Botham John in Dallas, Texas, in his apartment deserved to be murdered by a police officer while he was sitting on his couch in his living room. Oh well, another black man. That Philando Castile is just another one we can just let go. That those children in Yemen, who cares? Those children in Palestine, those whatever, we can sacrifice them. That we can turn the other eye because of the dehumanization of those people. Whether they are in your inner cities here in the United States, or they're in your struggling countries, that many of whom are struggling because of the United States, or they are caged up at the border right now. Children caged up at the border right now. I mean, I've been there numerous times now. You know that tent city, Tornillo, Texas, which is growing, by the way? I've been to the refugee camps in Syria, and I've been to Tornillo, Texas. You know what? They almost look the same. But you're not allowed to take pictures in Tornillo. I have clearance to go in there to minister to the children by a Dallas County judge Clay Jenkins, he managed to get me clearance. You're not allowed to take pictures. They don't want you to report on the fact that the government is responsible for trafficking children. This is government human trafficking. I pass by an immigration detention center every day in Dallas, right? One of Trump's donors is making $450 million over stacking these immigration detention centers. We have an unchecked beast of power, and we've got to do something about it. It's full of exploitation and abuse. And they're going to keep on doing that if we remain either in apathy or idleness. Because I'll tell you what about racists in America. And I knew David Duke burns crosses on black people's lawns in predominantly white neighborhoods in December 2008 after Obama was elected president. You talk about intimidation. He and his people in New Orleans, Louisiana went and burned crosses on black families' lawns in predominantly white neighborhoods to intimidate, to say that don't think just because you got a president in there that anything has changed in regards to the power dynamic. We still run this town, right? Let me tell you something about racists. And let me tell you something about those people that go out there and vote to ensure that people like Donald Trump and Ted Cruz remain in their positions. They worship their white supremacy. They worship that power. They worship it. I mean, it is God to them. And they are organized. And when Donald Trump tweets something racist, they get energized. They go to the polls in throngs. They make sure that they vote. They make sure that those power structures are upheld. They are counting on us to remain either in apathy or idleness. They're counting on us to succumb to this idea that this is what America always will be because this is what it always has been. When they say make America great again, you know what they're saying. For everybody else, it's when was America ever great? Seriously, when was it slavery? Was it Jim Crow? When was America great? Make America great again, we got to take our country back. If you can, I mean, it's very thinly veiled right now. I mean, the president calls himself a nationalist. It doesn't get more blatant than that. What that does is it drives people to the polls because that fragility, that thought that white supremacy might actually lose its hold on the country and its power in the country, which has continued to yield dead black and brown people either through war, through militarism, through police brutality, through our government trafficking, through immigration. All of these things are maintained by what? By their dedication to their evil, to their call. We've got to fight that. We've got to fight that. And you know what? Not only do we have to fight it at the polls, not only do we have to fight it by showing that Muslim, Christian, Jew, black, brown, white, all of us can come together and say that this is not an acceptable way for America to continue, that we believe America is a work in progress, but we ultimately want to see that progress materialize in our own lifetimes. We believe that it has potential to get to a certain place. It's going to come when we insist not just on participating, but participating in the fullness of ourselves, participating in a way that not only will we not be intimidated into silence, but we are going to be big-mouthed Muslims. Not only will we make it to those tables, inshallah, but we will challenge the country to be more dignified. Challenge this country to live up to what it's supposed to be. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had a dream. The last sermon that he wrote, that he was going to deliver the Sunday that he was murdered, was why America might go to hell. You need the dream of Martin and the lived nightmare of Malcolm. You need the optimism of the I have a dream speech, and you also need the sense of urgency of that letter from a Birmingham jail. We need to recognize that this election is so consequential. This moment is consequential for us. And inshallah, it catalyzes us to something greater. But where do we end up at the end of the day? How will the history books be written? What will we be able to actually influence and change? Muhammad Ali, May Allah have mercy on him. You know, whenever I'm feeling down, I just go and I watch old Muhammad Ali videos. Like, just watch Muhammad Ali in an interview, watch him, you know, watch him in a fight, just watch Muhammad Ali. He will give you confidence. Till now, may Allah have mercy on him. This man was incredible. I actually got a hold of a few of his dawah pamphlets. Muhammad Ali used to sign pamphlets, 200 pamphlets a week, dawah pamphlets, that he'd go pass out, or he'd have people pass out, because he said if it has my autograph on it, people won't throw it away. So I got a stack of pamphlets about Malcolm X signed by Muhammad Ali that he was passing out. And you see this man who said that I am American. First of all, Muhammad Ali versus the government, taking on the government in a time where the Vietnam War was dogma. I mean, this was a religious commitment, right? This was a religious commitment. Muhammad Ali standing up to the government when it took on, when it undertook the Vietnam War. Muhammad Ali saying that I am ready to die. A 20-something-year-old man that's ready to give up millions of dollars, that's ready to stand in front of a firing squad, that when he's told your name is Cassius Clay, says, no, my name is Muhammad Ali, and fights back and stands for something. And the country hated him, and he lost everything. He lost his money, he was about to lose his freedom, he lost his career, peak of his career, he was about to go to jail. And he still stood up. And you know what Muhammad Ali said? He said, I am America. I am America, but I'm the part that you won't recognize. My name, not yours. My religion, not yours. My color, not yours. I am America. He understood that when you believe in something, you do not require immediate gratification. You do not require that your efforts only yield fruit in the moment. But what you really strive for is a movement, is change that is long-lasting. And even if you have to strive and struggle and face consequences in that moment, it's worth it if you believe in something greater than that moment. And look at him now. I thought about Muhammad Ali when they wanted to put the star in the Hollywood Walk of Fame. You know, if you ever watch, there's a movie called The Trials of Muhammad Ali. It's probably the best documentary on Muhammad Ali. It's much better than the Will Smith one, right? the Trials of Muhammad Ali. It starts off with him being denigrated on a radio show or on a TV show, talk show, being told that I think you're going to find yourself in the trash can of history. And I think you're a showman, you're an entertainer, you're a nobody, America will scorn you, you will be remembered this way, and he just sits there and takes it. And then the next scene in that movie, if you watch The Trials of Muhammad Ali, is him receiving the Medal of Freedom. And then they're trying to put his name on the Walk of Fame, the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and he says, no, the name Muhammad cannot be stepped on, so I'm sorry, I just can't have it on the Hollywood Walk. And so they put it up on the wall, because they had to honor Muhammad Ali. And then his funeral, which I had the blessing of attending. And I remember, when the Quran was being recited and the funeral was taking place, and Fox News had no choice but to broadcast it because it was the funeral of the most famous American of the 20th century. They had to broadcast it. And I thought to myself, when's the last time that you had the Quran being recited on Fox News uninterrupted without the commentary of Sean Hannity, right, or Tucker Carlson, or whoever it is? When's the last time you had that happen? It was just uninterrupted. It was beautiful. This man was being honored. Because you know what? He insisted on his presence as a Muslim American, fully American, and he challenged America to be what America is supposed to be. And he did not care about the gratification of the moment. He didn't care. He did not care about the consequences he would face in that pursuit. And so he was catalyzed by something. You know what he was catalyzed by? You know why Muhammad Ali learned how to box? Because someone stole his bike when he was a kid. Thank God for that, whoever stole his bike. that catalyzed something for him, that taught him, that gave him that moment, right? And you know what he did, by the way? I just have to end with this because this is what it means to stay true to that moment, right? To always see things through. The neighborhood that Muhammad Ali used to jog in Miami, the place where he got pulled over by a cop simply for being black in that neighborhood. You know what he did? He purchased this humongous masjid. You can actually go see it in downtown. You can go see it in Miami. It's a beautiful masjid. He purchased this masjid anonymously. Huge masjid in the inner city. Named it Masjid al-Ansar, the masjid of the helpers. The condition was that this masjid has to have a consistent community service presence. That it can't just be a place where Muslims come together and pray. It also has to serve the community on a weekly basis. That's greatness. That's greatness, right? He got it. He understood. He never forgot himself. He never forgot what he was supposed to be, what he was supposed to be doing. And he never, at no point, did Muhammad Ali forget that the higher that Allah raises you, the higher the responsibility that Allah has placed upon you. The more opportunities that He gives you to do good for people, the more accountable you are to those opportunities. So we're sitting in this masjid today, and it could have been a very different masjid. But you're sitting here and phone banking. If you think about what that terrorist wanted to achieve when he firebombed this masjid, it was to intimidate you into silence. It was to make you scared to come to the masjid. It was to make you scared to exist as a Muslim American in this country and in this city. It was to drive people away. Look what he catalyzed instead. So while he sits in prison for the next, while he sits in prison for the rest of his life, inshallah, this is what he started. This is what he started. So you know what? It drives us out of complacency, and we have to remember that the moment is a blessing from Allah, so long as we make the best of that moment. So thank you all, Jazakallah khairan, for taking this time out, for being this committed, for doing what you did, for potentially being the difference. This is historic. I don't know any masjid in the country that's doing this right now.
Give us homework.
What's that?
Give us homework.
Give us homework. Your homework is to exist beyond the election. Your homework is to continue to come together after the election, to strategically engage, to look, there's no shortage of work. There's no shortage of work. The protest has to be followed by organizing. The election has to be followed by engagement. So keep it organized. Keep it scheduled. Keep yourselves active. If you don't like what's happening in certain places, do something about it. Offer an alternative. If you don't like how someone else is doing something, then offer an alternative. But stay engaged, stay productive, and recognize that idleness is not an option. And idleness is not an option in 2018, in 2019, in 2020. Idleness is never an option, whether there's an election going on or not. So continue to engage, continue to be active in those spaces that are deeply rooted in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. You don't need a politician to tell you that you should be doing something about racialized poverty, that you should be doing something about slavery in the prison industrial complex, that you should be doing something about police brutality, that you should be doing something about immigration reform and asylum seekers, that you should be doing something about childhood education. You don't need a politician to tell you that stuff. Allah already told it to you. And the Prophet, peace be upon him, already lived it for you. So draw from that. Show people what Islam looks like in action in those areas. There's no controversy about any of that stuff. That's our deen. That's who we are. That's what Allah produced us for. That's what the people should know us by. Right? So beyond the election, exist beyond the election. But inshallah, this has catalyzed a few, and hopefully, inshallah, it will empower a few. And when the people who you got elected by your efforts, right? When they are there in those places, you will know that your voice matters in this society, that you have influence, that we can make a difference. I've got to tell you guys a story. I told this story online because It's crazy to me how Allah makes these things happen sometimes. In Irving, Texas, I've told this a few times, so if you've heard it, I'm sorry, but you can memorize it a little bit better so that you can relate. In Irving, Texas, we had a mayor of ours that suddenly started to target the Muslim community. Her name was Beth Van Dyne. 1 year before, she was in the masjid for the Ramadan iftar, and she boasted about how diverse of the city Irving was, and that was great and wonderful. The next year, she's finding herself in Tea Party circles and talking about how I think they're running a secret Sharia tribunal in that masjid. I think they've got this going on, that going on. She completely demonized the Muslim community, and she used the Muslim community as a springboard to the Trump administration. So now she's in the Trump administration. She's part of the Trump administration. Now, we knew she wasn't running for re-election as mayor because the mayor's office had become too small for her. We understood that. We knew exactly what she was doing. But what that led to was regular armed white supremacist groups coming in front of the masjids with their AR-15s, till now, by the way, regularly showing up in front of our masjids, intimidating us. Hate crimes went up in Irving. I mean, it was so reckless and irresponsible and dangerous and violent. The whole Clock Boy situation, if you guys remember the kid that went to school, that was in Irving, Texas. And so what did we say? We said, you know what? Every single person. I sat there in the Irving City Council when they voted on the anti-Sharia resolution. So here's what we're going to do. When that board lights up and you see who voted in favor of that anti-Sharia legislation, which doesn't mean anything, it was just a fear tactic. I want all of us to take a picture of that board. Just stand up and take a picture of that board. They circulated my home address after that, by the way, in all these white supremacist circles. They put it on websites online so that they could shut me up. I mean, I had to get security on my house because they circulated my home address. They really tried to make us afraid. We took pictures of that board, and all five of those city council members were out the door. Now, one seat, the story gets better. One seat came down to a provisional ballot that saved the city of Irving from a $75,000 runoff election. There were 3 provisional ballots. The provisional ballot that came back was a 19-year-old disabled Muslim kid who came back to cast his ballot again to remove one of those people that had targeted the Muslim community with his votes. And that was in the papers, all over the papers, that was one Muslim vote that turned that election. That's the power of that one vote. And it couldn't have been more poetic. It couldn't have been more poetic. That's the power of each and every single vote. You don't know that it might have been your phone call, inshallah, that tips the scales in the favor of the candidates that we want to see in those positions, that we believe deserve to be in those positions. So do not underestimate, do not minimize your work. The Prophet, peace be upon him, said, do not belittle any act of good. Do not belittle any act of good. But what did the Prophet, peace be upon him, say is a sign of goodness? Consistency. That the most beloved of actions to Allah are the consistent ones, the consistent good deeds, even if they're very small. So that's the whole point, just consistency. Inshallah, we can remain consistent, and this is the start of something very, very, very special, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum. It's very difficult to follow these men. It's late. And I would not say anything, but I'm not here just representing myself. I'm representing the movement. So I'll say just a couple very brief things. Greater than fear. I love that theme. And as we were starting this campaign for the Hennepin County Attorney's Office, as campaigns often do, you bounce around taglines, Justice Rising, and we came up with Reclaim Justice. And it's really grown on me, and even more so tonight, because I think there's different ways you can interpret that. But one way to interpret it is that we're reclaiming justice from fear. Our justice system has been built upon fear, and it's been fueled by the politics of fear, fear of black people, fear of somebody who's been caught doing something that, you know, maybe somebody else has done, we just weren't caught doing, fear of risk. And like I said, this is a movement that didn't just start in this campaign. 10 years ago, we started the Second Chance Coalition in Minnesota to break down that fear, to change the narrative of people that have made mistakes in the past. Isaiah has been part of that movement, Faith in Minnesota. These men here are part of that movement. The criminal justice part is just a subset. And I just want to play off of what Keith said earlier. What you're doing is not, politics is both an end and a means, politics and government. We have to get there to make the changes, to take fear out of policy. But it's a means, and that it's a means of showing others that we care, that we love them. Tonight we were knocking on doors in a fancy apartment in St. Louis Park. And we knocked on the door of a young African-American woman who had just moved here from Austin, Texas. And she said her mother was afraid for her moving here because she heard about the racism up here in Minnesota. But when she heard our 3 or 4 volunteers and me talking about this campaign and what we were trying to do to change racism here in Minnesota, she almost cried. She was so happy to meet us, and she gave us all high fives, and that's what this is all about. Thank you so much for being part of this movement. And I'll just also reiterate that it doesn't stop at the end of this election. It's going to take changing our justice system to one that's based more on compassion and love. You know, I have a 15 and 16-year-old. I know they have to have consequences. They have to be held accountable as they get older. But that doesn't mean I don't do it with compassion and love. And to really bring that to our justice system is going to take a long, long time, and we'll need your support. Thank you for all you're doing, and that way we'll continue to do.
First of all, I want to thank our guests here, for visiting us, candidates, Keith Ellison, Mark Hazy, and as you know, what Sheikh Omar talked about, having these powerful or powers that are unchecked. That's why we need candidates who will check that. That's why we need to get them into office so that they can, represent our voice, because we're not there, they're there for us. So that's why we need to go out there and volunteer, door knock, do everything that we can so that, we don't get into complacency or just we're sitting on the sideline. This is the time. This is when it matters the most. And I want to thank all the volunteers, or also on behalf of all the canvassers and people that are volunteering with the Faith in Minnesota today. And I want to thank also people who are joining us right now in this group also, that it takes all of us to make a difference. We need everyone. This GOTV week is going to be the next 3 or 4 days will be the most important days. Actually, 4 days. And we need the people who are watching and the people who are sitting here, we need everybody to carve out time to come and either door knock with us, phone bank with us. Especially on Tuesday, there's going to be a lot of people that don't know where to vote. The primaries we had people like Mahad who was giving rides to mothers. We had people who didn't know, needed translation. What do I do? So, if you could be, you could help someone. That could be that one vote that Sheikh Suleiman talked about. So don't minimize what you can do. We need all of you guys, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. And inshallah, I will bring Sheikh Walid, inshallah, up to say a couple of words to us, inshallah.
specifically, we need people to canvass tomorrow. We need people to phone bank on Tuesday. So all of you today sign up, right? How many of you signed up? This means yes.
Oh, damn.
Those of you who signed up, Laura or somebody from Faith in Minnesota will call you to follow up. If you didn't sign up, you missed out a lot of khair for today. Tomorrow is an opportunity for you to make up. All these people, they hit 14,000 homes, 13,700 some numbers. And you did it. Just make it real out there. It's your opportunity, you have 4 more days, that's it.
الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. فقط يعني نرحب بالضيوف الكرام ونسأل الله سبحانه وتعالى أن يبارك في جهودكم ونحث الجميع إن شاء الله على المشاركة في الانتخابات، باختيار من يكون في مصلحة المسلمين ومصلحة الضعفاء ويعني يرصد العدل ويحارب يعني الظلم والعدوان إن شاء الله بإذن الله تعالى. فنحث الجميع على المشاركة إن شاء الله في الانتخابات ونكون صوت مسموع بإذن الله تعالى. وكذلك على المساعدة في جمع الأسماء وتشجيع الآخرين حتى يشارك المسلمون بفعالية.
Sheikh Walid, just thank everyone for coming out here and talking about the importance of working together to uplift all of those working the cause, not just of the Muslims, but of the weak and the oppressed, and that fight against all forms of injustice and oppression. And this is a prophetic call, so we wanted to just thank all the organizers, thank all the volunteers, and thank the guests other than myself that came here tonight.
Thank you, inshallah ta'ala. Now, this is, we are concluding our event tonight. Jazakumullah khairan, and thank you for all those who formed back. Inshallah ta'ala, we will take pictures with Omar, Suleiman.